Here are a few of the weirdest things artists have done. Number 10. Robin Hood. In 2015, a wacky former MIT professor took art to a whole new level by robbing a bank in New York City and recording the heist. Joseph Gibbons, a filmmaker and, quote, visual artist, has taught for a decade at one of the world's most prestigious universities, and yet dumb enough to make robbing banks as part of his latest art project. Gibbons was charged with robbery after allegedly making off with a measly $1,000 from a Capital One bank located in Chinatown. He entered the bank wielding a camcorder and politely handing the teller a note demanding a donation for his church, according to court documents. Rhode Island police had also been hunting for Gibbons, who staged a similar stick-up there in mid-November 2014 and made off with around $3,000 in cash. While waiting for his arraignment, the eccentric academic allegedly told fellow inmates that his crime was for art's sake. Apparently robbing banks isn't a crime, it's artwork. What an excuse. Number 9. Let us help you. From Ginza to Times Square, from Tiananmen Square to Champs-Élysées, Han Bing and his cabbage have traveled the world. Walking the Cabbage in Tiananmen features an androgynous figure walking a cabbage in Beijing's Tiananmen Square. The artist behind the work, and obviously in front of the camera, is Chinese artist Han Bing. Walking the Cabbage in Tiananmen is part of one of a series of photographs. Han produced the Walking the Cabbage series over a period of 8 years, from 2000 to 2008. Han has said that he wanted to create a game for the public and to let society answer. He claims that he's just a player in the game. It's our job to interpret the meaning. His intention in making art is for people to see how much of our daily lives are routines that we've blindly absorbed. It's an attempt to raise questions about people's relationships with the fleeting yet important objects in their lives. If you ask me, walking a cabbage is just weird. Number 8. Rock in a hard place. In 2017, French performance artist Abraham Poincheval did a rather unusual performance called Pierre at the Palais de Tokyo Museum in Paris. He spent a week living inside a rock by sucking oxygen through tiny air holes and storing days' worth of his own bodily waste in bottles. We'll see around him. He sat sitting in a cavity that's been carved out of the rock in the shape of his body. He survived by eating soup and dried meats. I mean, really? He could have gone those 3 days without eating? Spoken of his 3-day exhibition as, quote, traveling in this rock without moving like an astronaut. Okay. It's by no means Poincheval's first exercise in endurance and isolation, nor his first time stuffed inside an inanimate object. Far from it. Back in 2014, he spent nearly 2 weeks living inside a bear carcass at the Parisian Hunting and Wildlife Museum. While inside the bear, he survived on worms and beetles. This guy exists in real life. What a time to be alive. Number 7. Annual surveillance. You know that saying, having eyes in the back of your head? Well, in 2010, a New York University professor decided to take that saying literally. He had a camera surgically implanted into the back of his skull. Wafa Bilal, an Iraqi-born photography professor, had the procedure done at a piercing studio for an art project commissioned by a museum in Doha, Qatar. A project like this was meant to establish a dialogue about surveillance. The project is called the Third Eye, and made use of the posterior camera by taking a snapshot every minute of Bilal's activities for a year. The images were then transmitted to Mataf, the Arab Museum of Modern Art, featuring an exhibit entitled Told, Untold, Retold, in time for the museum's opening. The thumb-sized camera was mounted on a titanium plate inserted in the back of his head. Cable runs from the camera to a computer that he carries in a custom-made shoulder bag, providing a real-time global positioning signal of his location that was transmitted to a website made specifically for the project. Just wow. Number 6. Not famous anymore? Back in February 2014, Shia LaBeouf caused a bit of a controversy at the Berlin Film Festival when he arrived at the red carpet wearing a brown paper bag over his head with the words, "I am not famous anymore," written on it. Does that make sense to any of you? Now that Shia LaBeouf wasn't famous anymore, he then decided to be sorry. He performed at a Los Angeles-based art installation called I Am Sorry. Yeah, I'm using the word performed really loosely here. Essentially, his I Am Sorry performance consisted of him occupying a LA gallery for 6 days, wearing the same I Am Not Famous Anymore paper bag, and silently crying in front of people. Visitors to the art show were invited to observe LaBeouf's performance one at a time. Before watching his performance, visitors were supposed to stop at a table to see items that appear to correspond with LaBeouf's career. Things such as a Transformers toy, a whip, Hershey's Kisses, a bottle of Jack Daniel's whiskey, a bottle of cologne, pliers, a ukulele, and a copy of Daniel Clow's book, The Death Ray. LaBeouf said that the title of the project was a genuine reflection of how he felt at the time. Yep. Sorry. Number 5. Hug Project. Gao brothers Zen and Chiang have been collaborating with each other on various projects since 1985. Based in Beijing, they produce performance art, photography, sculpture, paintings, and written works. In 1999, the Gao brothers first conceived their interactive performance art piece, Embrace, the Utopia of Hugging, for 20 minutes. That was a site-specific performance of the piece, which invited 60 strangers to hug for an extended period of time. Most of the time, participants are pre-registered volunteers, and the performance is open for public viewing. Some models are dressed, while others are nude. According to the Gao brothers, they developed Embrace as a means to confront pain and suffering with a simple, yet ultimately monumental gesture. The performance has since been presented in multiple locations, including London, Rome, Singapore, and various cities across China, and the Kemper Museum of Contemporary Art in Kansas City. Number 4. Cake for everyone. To say something strange happened on the subway in New York City is like saying that the sun came up. New Yorkers and frequent visitors know that the subway in New York City is a place where you're almost guaranteed to see something out of the ordinary. Performance artist Bettina Banian's latest project definitely applies here. Banian took to the train with a bag of supplies and set up a baking shop, frosting and decorating a cake while commuters around her looked on in genuine confusion. And, well, maybe some delight as well. She explained that the cake wasn't for a special occasion, but instead that it was for everyone. And she offered up slices to those people brave enough to take something to eat from a stranger with a spatula and frosting in the New York subway. Number 3. Banana Man. Ever see a guy surrounded by a wall of bananas? Yeah, me neither. The wall was an installation by Toronto artist Xiao Kang, a Chinese immigrant to Canada. What exactly did he want to show by constructing a round, well-shaped barrier out of hundreds of bananas and putting himself inside? The well was apparently a stand-in for the racial barriers that we continue to have in society and that Kang has experienced since moving to Canada. In Kang's case, the biggest barrier he has been facing was the cultural issue. A co-worker of Kang said that because he's been living in Canada so long, he's lost his Chinese accent. But he also doesn't feel native in Beijing anymore. He doesn't feel at home in Canada because he feels he hasn't really been welcomed as part of the culture. The well is a stand-in for the predicament that Kang's faces. Being trapped in the well during the performance is a metaphor for Kang's trapped identity at a time of transition from one culture to another. What Kang wanted was to get people to remove the bananas. As every banana disappears, so too does part of the barrier separating him from the Canadian society. Number 2. What in a block? In 2015, 5 artists in Rotterdam, the Netherlands, were arrested after their art project almost went horribly wrong. A woman participating in the project had climbed into a box, which the 4 others covered in plaster. According to the Rotterdam Police Department's Twitter account, the artists started panicking when the plaster became too hard. I mean, isn't that what plaster is supposed to do? Firefighters were quickly called after the woman couldn't get enough oxygen through a straw, which had been inserted through a tiny breathing hole. They had to use heavy equipment to break up the thick plaster to extract the woman from the plaster block. Police took all 5 people involved in the art project into custody, including the rescued woman. There was no word on what the art project was attempting to portray. My guess is stupidity. Number 1. Incubation. Wait, wasn't this the same guy earlier? Yep, Abraham Ponchevel's back already. The weird French guy with the bear and the rock strikes again. Well, 2017 was obviously his year, as he did another genius performance. He hatched his first chick after spending 3 weeks sitting on 10 eggs in a Paris museum. I mean, on a side note, his dad made headlines for inventing pills that supposedly makes farts like roses. No, really, I can't make this stuff up. I'm bringing this up just to help us understand why Abraham is the way he is. Anyways, Abraham was on public display inside a glass case at the Palais de Tokyo Modern Art Museum again. He slept sitting on the eggs and apparently it's been a lot harder than being shut inside a rock. Apparently, one of the hardest aspects of his time incubating the eggs was the heat inside the glass vitrine, as the eggs had to be kept at a minimum 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. He was also only allowed a half-hour break every 24 hours. His patience finally paid off when the first of the eggs began to hatch after 3 weeks. At least he's vowed that his chicks will never end up on a dinner plate, and that he's planned to give them a happy life on his father's farm in the west of France. Hey, remember, everything smells like roses there. Here's what's next.
Let's just call it oral delights.
The campaign shows female and male teenagers with a cigarette in their mouths while being met face first with a man's crotch. I mean, come on, let's be for real. Does anyone actually smoke cigarettes like this in real life? The caption basically means that to smoke is to...